Right, so there's another couple of wires sleeved, ready to go on the bike. As you might imagine, I'm now in the middle of wiring up the bike from scratch, so quite a lot of work to do there. So I was asked the question, why do you want to rebuild your wiring harness from scratch? Why not just go and buy a brand new wiring harness from the likes of Z Power, get it on the bike, and you're done. And that would be great, except the fact that it wouldn't work because I've changed, and I'm going to change, so many different components on the bike. So for example, I've got a different speedo tacho unit, I've got different coils, I've got a different rear lamp, and of course I'm using the D-box as the heart of the wiring harness on the bike. This is a electronic control box from Germany, which is a bit like the M unit from Motor Gadget, which controls all the elements of the wiring on your bike. And I made a video about that last week, all about the D-box, so we won't go there again. So in this video then, we're going to cover the actual wiring of the bike, as I say, from scratch until hopefully it's all finished and working, except I can't prove it all works because right now the bike doesn't have an engine and won't have an engine for quite a long time, so I can only test so many things on the bike, but we'll do our best, So why do I want to, completely rebuild the wiring? Well, because here we have the original wiring, which is in a bit of a state. It's far from standard, somebody just cut it and messed about with it over the years, and I didn't want to fit that back on the bike. And even if I did want to do that, it wouldn't work because I've got so many different changes on the bike already. I also want to make some upgrades to the wiring on the bike, to the components on the bike, such as let's see, here we have this little horrible rusty old box, and this is the regulator for the charging system on the bike. I was actually quite surprised that I found that on the bike because most bikes from the 80s don't have that anymore. They have a combined rectifier stroke regulator on the bike. So it's like, oh god, don't want that. And in fact, here we have the original smallish looking rectifier still attached. Oops, there you go. It was still attached to the charging system on the bike. I'm going to get some new ones for that, so don't worry about it. So what I did was I went off to Electrics World and bought one of these things, a brand new modern combined regulator rectifier for the bike, which should work a lot better than this old thing. Got to find a home for it, of course, on the bike because it won't fit where this thing fitted because I've got the D-box in the way, but it's fine because I am losing some various components on the bike to make room for the rectifier. So anyway, with all that said, it's time to move on and look at the bike itself and see how far I've got so far. And so now, looking at the bike, you can see I'm working in quite a cramped space, as I have been for the last couple of days. That's because it's been raining all week, and I don't want to move these bikes outside to give me a bit more room. So I've got to wait for a dry day. I'm not really helping myself here because I don't have an engine, so I'm sort of guessing sometimes as to how long the wires should be which go into the engine. But all I've done is I've just made them extra long and we can cut them back when the engine's in the bike. So right now things aren't looking too good because I've got a right mess of wires everywhere. Things aren't tucked away yet, particularly down here around the D-box, which I fitted to the bike, by the way, by using heavy strength Velcro. Used it before and it works really well. It's surprisingly strong. I've not really hit any problems yet in all this kind of stuff, but then again I've not really done any testing yet. The one thing I would say is I'm using the standard kind of old-fashioned switch gear, which the D-box is designed to take, but I would save myself a lot of wiring if I used the push-button so-called momentary contact switches. By the way, I did read, quite surprisingly, that the D-box is able to completely run your bike with just two push buttons, one on the left, one on the right. I was quite surprised about that, but apparently you can. That's because just like the M unit, one button can do more than one job. So for example, on my M units, one button can turn on your headlamp. You press it again, it toggles to high beam. Press it again, it goes to low beam. Keep it pressed in for 2 seconds and it turns off the lights completely. So by taking that idea a bit further, you can make one button do about 4 or 5 different jobs. You just have to learn how to use it. So for example, you press it once, it's the indicator. You press it twice quickly, that might be the lights. You press the other side quickly twice, that might start the bike. You press it 3 times, it might kill the engine, and things like that. So that's all programmable in the D-Box. So quite impressed with that. I might actually try that out on a different bike one day. So yeah, so far so good. As you can see, I'm using all these old-fashioned sort of bullet connectors, which are sleeved in clear, soft plastic insulation, which I really like. And one other reason for that is it matches the connectors which come already on the gauge and the switchgear. They both have the same style connector, so it makes sense to keep with that. Otherwise I've got to cut them all off and change them all, which is even more work. So far I've got about, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours spread over 2 or 3 days on this bike so far, and I'm still, as you can see, far from finished. It's a right mess, but that's because I've not yet grouped everything together and made it all look nice and neat, and you know, zip tied everything to the frame, which I'll be doing in the next day or so when I can get access to that side of the bike, because yeah, it's been a bit of a slow, boring process. So yeah, so it's not difficult. I mean, wiring's not difficult. You just have to sort of keep at it, you know, circuit by circuit, and eventually you get there. I think the most difficult thing for me is making sure the wires are all the exact length, because you try it out, it looks okay, and you think, oh no, that wire there is about, you know, 1 centimetre too long or 5 mil too long, so it's a bit baggy. Shall I cut it off and do it all again? No, I won't bother, I'll just leave it, it'll be okay, you know. So just making it look nice and pretty is for me the most difficult part of the wiring of the bike. In the past I didn't do wiring on my bikes, I used to leave it to the mechanics at the local bike shop or whatever, but I got frustrated waiting for things to happen, so I sat down one day, read a book on wiring, looked at a few YouTube videos, studied things, and I thought, oh, it's not that bad, you know. So sure enough, once I tried it for real, turned out it wasn't that complicated after all. Yeah, so so far so good. I need to get access now to the far side of the bike, so I'll come out the rectifier on the other side of the battery box. I've got to drill a hole for that, no doubt, get it fitted, and then yeah, we can move forward. I'm still waiting for some parts to arrive. I've got to buy some new indicators and a headlamp shell. Yeah, I've got the headlight shell, I don't have the unit, that's not arrived yet. I did foolishly give away, hang on, oh, my foot's gone dead. I did foolishly give away the original indicators on the bike, so I thought, oh, it's a bit rusty, get rid of them. I've got some in a box here to use, but they don't fit the balloon bike. The mounts are all different, just doesn't work. So I've gone out, no problem, I'll go and buy some original Kawasaki indicators, until I found out how much they cost. £99 for 4. But you've got to get them, so I've got them ordered and they'll be here any day now. The original indicators on here were big round ones, but that's wrong. They should be square ones, so I've got the correct square ones for the bike. Yeah, so that's it. So far so good, and we'll carry on the video. But I've had some tea and I've got some more work done on the bike, and then what I think I'll do is I'll start doing some testing with my multimeter to test the various circuits that I've built so far. And now I've got to the point where I can start doing some testing on the circuits for the very first time. So I've got my little 12 volt test battery here, connected up to the D-Box and some earths, very crudely done, but hopefully it should work. So let's try and turn on the ignition key for the very first time, and hopefully we won't have any smoke and fire and God knows what else. So here goes, on camera for the first time. Right, well, there's no smoke and fire yet, that's good. Now I have noticed there's a little blue LED flashing on the D-Box, so I guess that means it's getting power, so that's great. Now I don't yet have the indicators fitted, or the front light, or the rear brake. That's not really a problem, except for the fact that the D-Box is programmed by using the buttons on the bars along with the indicators flashing to tell you whether you're doing a yes or a no on the various questions it asks you to set up the D-Box. So I can't do that yet, but what I can do is I can do something quite simple, like say test a horn for the very first time. So here goes, here's the horn button. Will it work? Yes, it does. So I've got a working horn, thank God for that, after all that work. And let's see what else I can do. Well, not much yet. I've got to wait for the indicators and headlamp to arrive, which are due today, in fact any minute now. And once they're fitted, I can test that out, and also hopefully do the simple programming of the yes and the no's on the various options of the D-Box. And so just got to wait now for those parts to arrive, get them fitted, and then we can progress. And now with the headlamp and indicators having arrived, as you can see, I've got the 2 rear indicators mounted. Now the back end of my bike the rear lamp and so on is completely non-standard. Therefore, these indicators are not mounted in the standard position. Instead, they're mounted on this bracket here, which means they're now fully rubber mounted on the frame, which is great, except that they won't work because the body needs to be earthed to make them work. Therefore, I've made my own little earth leads here to go on the back of the indicators, and hopefully that will solve the problem. You can actually buy these, but about £15 for one. I thought I'd make my own. I'm now just waiting to get some M10 fine nuts to go on the back, because I don't have any now. So once they arrive, that's the two rear indicators mounted and hopefully working. Meanwhile, here at the front of the bike, I've got a problem because the indicator stems I've got with my kit doesn't fit the front of my bike. No way, no how. These have a kind of diamond shaped boss in them, which stops the indicators from spinning around in the frame. But my bike has a different design, so these don't fit. Therefore, I've just ordered the correct stems, and when they arrive, we can get the front indicators on the bike at last. And now at last I've got access to the right hand side of the bike, and in particular the right hand side of the battery box, because here is where I want to mount my new rectifier regulator. And looking at this side, I've got one threaded boss here, and one's not enough. I need really two mounts for the rectifier. So I've also got an issue because I've got these protrusions sticking out from the side of the battery box, so they'll get in the way. So I think what I'll have to do is find somewhere on here to drill a hole, then make a plate to go on this battery box, and I can then mount my rectifier to that plate. I'll have to mount it away from these protrusions, but that shouldn't be too bad. So that's the next job I've got to do. And while I've got access to this side of the bike, I've also fitted the rear brake pedal and the mechanism, and also this is just a generic cheap brake light switch I got from eBay for about £5. Now it's not a Kawasaki part, but they're all pretty damn similar. They attach to a little boss here on the frame. It's attached to the pedal by this little spring here, which attaches to a tab on the pedal. And I've just noticed, which I didn't notice before, I've just noticed the tab, which has a hole in it here, has been bent down hard against the side of the pedal, so I can't attach my spring, unfortunately. Yeah, I didn't notice that, so I've got to take off the pedal, get it in the vise, and hopefully try and straighten up this bent tab here. I think that's okay. Let's try it on the bike. And so now, with the foot pedal back in place, I've got the spring in place too, and you can see how the brake switch works when I activate the pedal. That's how it works. I also currently lack a return spring which goes behind here for the brake pedal. Don't have one, so I've ordered one, and when it arrives, all this has got to come off again so I can fit the return spring, because right now it just sits up where it wants to sit. You know, it doesn't spring back as it should do. So that's a job for another day. And so now I've mounted the new rectifier regulator to this aluminium plate. I've also now mounted this to one side, and this is a 10 amp contact breaker. I won't use it as a contact breaker, which is kind of like a fuse. I'm going to use it as an isolated post so I can send 12 volt ignition power around the bike to other areas that need it, such as the gauges. Right, so now what I've got to do is find out where to drill a hole on this side so I can mount it to the side of the battery box. Right, so here goes. Have I got it all lined up? Hopefully I have. There we go. I've even got a 15mm spacer from the little kit I bought from eBay a while ago, and that's just the perfect size to go behind this plate and make up the difference to the side of the bracket here. I can't bolt it right up because of these flanges that stick out from the battery box, so I've got that little spacer there. A bit fiddly to fit, but I'll do that on another day. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So now let's get the rectifier back on this plate and get it finally bolted up to the frame. And so finally I've got the rectifier mounted on this plate along with this contact breaker. So now, sadly, I've run out of time, so I've got to push this bike back against the wall, move the other bikes back in, and we'll carry on tomorrow. And now here we are, it's the next morning, and I've done a bit more work on the bike, as you can see. So I can't really do much more with the rectifier because I need the engine for that, but I have done a bit more work here. This is my new main kind of distribution point for the 12 volt ignition coming from the D-box. Now there are things which aren't powered directly from the D-box, such as the Dana coils, the Dana ignition, the gauges and the speed sender or sensor, and that's 4 different things. So I've got here 4 different wires all going off to power those particular components on the bike when you turn the ignition key on. So with that done, then I can now concentrate on the other side of the bike and make it look a lot neater than it looks at the moment. And now here we are with the bike pushed against the wall again, and I've got the battery, my little test battery, plugged into the system. So I'm going to try and turn it on again and see what happens. So here goes. Oh well, first of all, I've now got power to the speed of tach units. That's great. Does my horn still work? It does. That's great. What else can I test? I've only got the 2 rear indicators fitted yet because I don't yet have the stems for the front. They've not arrived yet. So let's see what happens if I turn that on. Oh yes, I've got that on. Oh, and also I've got the relay here that's working. And what about the other side? No. Now what's interesting is that's working when I move it, but when I turn it back to off, it keeps on working. Haha. So when I move it the other way, all the way off, it stops. Yeah, I think that's because I've not programmed a D-box yet to tell it I'm using these old-fashioned switches, the old-fashioned switch gear. You can program it to use either the momentary contact switches, little buttons, or these, and I've not had the chance yet to do that, so that's something I'm going to do next. But yeah, at least I've got a couple of things working yet. Now actually, what happens if I use the... Yeah, so that's flashing, but I'm not getting any flashing on this side of the indicator, so that's probably an earth or something that's not right yet. Yeah, it still flashes, look, it's still flashing there even though I've turned it off. Yeah, you've got to go all the way, so that's something I've got to look into. I'll take off the tail unit in a minute and hopefully I'll find a bad connection somewhere. So yeah, that's not too bad. I've done everything now except for one thing, and that is the front speedo sender. And that's a problem which I've had also on the Mark II project, because they give you 2 little zip ties to zip tie the sender to the bottom of the fork leg. And with these discs I've got on the bike now, which are from an R6, there's about 1/2 mm clearance between the disc bolts and the inside of the fork leg, and there's no way the little sender will fit inside there. I got around that problem on the Mark II by simply fitting it on the rear disc. This bike has a rear drum, so that won't work, so I have to make a little cool bracket to hold the sender in place at the appropriate distance from the disc mount. So that's something I'll do on another day. So right, I've now got to take off the tail section and investigate why that doesn't work, and do a little bit more tidying up, I think. And then yeah, I think that's about as far as I can go, because until I get the engine there's not much else I can do. Right, so I've taken off the tail section to get at the wiring of the indicator. So let's try again. I'll turn it on, put it on there, and well, it's flashing on there, so it's definitely getting power somewhere. So I've got a problem with this, so let's have a look. These are the wires here. Oh, it's working now, so it looks like one of my little connectors here isn't working too well. There's obviously something a bit awry with this connection, or this connector, or perhaps this one here. That's now carefully, yeah, I think I need to do a bit more work. This little connector here, a bit of investigation. Actually, the whole bike is held together, if you like. The wiring is held together with connectors. I very rarely solder wires together because I don't like soldering too much, and I find connectors are much easier to use and to modify things. If you want to change something, you can just unplug it and away you go. If you solder a joint, you've then got to cut it up and throw it away. So yeah, it looks like I've got a poor connection here. I'll just try it again. Let's have a look. Yeah, as soon as I do that, it's happy again, isn't it? Right, so that's working. The funny thing is, when I turn it off, it's still flashing. If I now move the switch all the way over to the right, it stops. Turn it back, it's all stopped. If I now go and push it on the right side, it works. Yeah, that's because the D-box thinks it's in push button mode. So I've now got to work out a way of, well, say work out. I've got to go back and study the little instructions you get and program the D-box to tell it I'm using the old-fashioned switch gear. Okay, so there's one small fix. I've got to go away, drink some tea, and then come back and program this D-box. Right, so I'm now going to attempt to program the D-box, and to do that you need to have the brake light on and the left indicator turned on when you turn on the ignition. So I turn on the ignition now. I've got the brake light on here, so that's fine, it just stays on. And I can try that, that's working. So if I turn it off and then put the indicator in the left hand position, now when I turn the ignition on, it should go into programming mode, which will make the indicators flash once to tell me I'm in the first position. So I've written down here in my little book what I've got to do. So position 1 is where are we? Auto cut off for the indicators. So if you do yes, that means after 40 flashes it'll auto turn off. If you put no, it won't. The yes and the no is governed by the indicator being on the left or the right, and you just go through it one by one. Once you've done the first one, the indicator will then flash twice to tell you in the second mode or the second program to do, and that one's you know, whether you got push buttons for the indicators or not, and it just goes on all the way through to 9 different options. So here goes then. We've got the brake light on, I know that much. That's set to the left, so it should go into mode now, into programming mode. Let's see. Well, it doesn't. Well, if it does, everything's turned off. I've got nothing anywhere. The gauge isn't lit up, the indicators aren't on, and the back brake's not on either. So what on earth is going on here? It certainly knows it's doing something different because I've set it up that way. Now there's normally a little blue light flashing there, so it's not. So it seems like it's turned itself off. It doesn't like what I've just done. So let me turn it off, and let's say set the indicator to being off. So we turn it back on again, what will happen? Yeah, everything works. Lights on, rear lamps on, indicator, that works. Yeah, still being happy. So if I turn it off and do, I'll turn the brake light off, hopefully. Back on again. Yeah, it's happy. Indicators work. Yeah. Put a brake on. Yeah. But if I leave that on and then leave the indicator on, turn it off. Now when I turn back on the ignition, it should, as I say, go into programming mode. The first time I tried it, it just died. It just didn't do anything. So let's see what happens now. Nothing again. So no LED. It's like there's no power. There's something that's going on here where the D-box doesn't like what's going on. It's just turned itself off. It should go into programming mode. Now, from all I know, it could now be in programming mode, but if it is, it's not telling me that, because it should now be flashing its indicators and telling me what's going on. So that's not good. I have no idea how to progress now. There's no mention of this in the instructions, so I have to go off and check online to see if anybody else has got this problem and what the solution is. If not, I'll just have to write to Mr. Axel Joost and say, look, you know, I've done this, what's going on? Hopefully somebody else has found the same problem as me, but yeah, very strange, very strange. Anyway, it's getting late now. It's dark and it's getting a bit late and cold, so we'll turn that off. But I bet if I turn that off now, just turn off one of the indicators, everything works again. But if I have them both on at the same time, which indicates it's in programming mode, it doesn't come on, so that's a bit confusing. Anyway, nobody said this would be easy, and this is the first time I've ever tried to use this particular control box from Axel, so Going to go indoors now, have a break, have a cup of tea, check online to see if I can find anybody else with this problem, and hopefully we'll find the answer and we'll soon have it all working. But yeah, it's a bit confusing, that, isn't it? A bit confusing. Oh well, we'll come back tomorrow and try again. And now here we are back in my garage, and it's the next morning, and it's still pretty damn cold, about -2 I think, but I don't care because I've had some good news, because last night I emailed Axel on his website, and this morning I woke up to a reply from Axel with the answer to the problem I've had going into setup mode with the D-box. Turns out I've been using the wrong version of the instructions, and the reason for that was because the correct version I got with the D-box from Germany was in German, so I went to his website, downloaded the English version as a PDF, but I downloaded the wrong version. So there you go. So he's replied back saying, no, when you go into setup mode with this D-box, you don't use the indicators and the rear brake, you just use the horn. So when I turn on the ignition, I press the horn at the same time, and it goes into setup mode, and away you go. So I just tried that, and it works, thank God, but I've not yet gone through all the 9 different yeses and nos yet, because I don't have time at the moment. So all I've got to do now is tidy up this wiring, which is still a little bit loose, but I've now pretty much finished all the wiring I can do on the bike until the engine goes in the frame. I've still got to make a clever little bracket to hold the speedo sender on the front forks, but all the wiring's in place for that. I've just got to plug it in and it's done, so I'll do that on a different day. So is that it then? Yeah, pretty much it is. It's been quite a long video this, actually. I think it's over 20 minutes long, but wiring is pretty slow, tedious, boring process, and as you can see I do have a few problems along the way, but nothing too bad really. And what I'm pleased about is Axel replied to me. I mean, it was a Sunday night when I emailed him. This morning, 7:30, Monday morning, I've got a reply, so you can't argue with that. Very good, excellent customer service in English as well, so that's great. So well done to Axel to reply to me so quickly when I've had that stupid little problem. So I think this video's now quite long enough. Unfortunately, wiring is boring and slow, but that's the way wiring is. You can't make it very exciting. So if any of you have any questions about what I've done so far, about using the D-box, then please put them in the description below. At the moment I can't really do much more because I don't have an engine, but the engine cases should be back from Camp Coat this week, hopefully, and I can take them over to Les's workshop and we can perhaps make a start on building up the engine. But that will be for a different video. So I think that's it for now. So thanks for watching and cheers.